So how many of you have some React Native experience? Okay, some of you. And is there anyone with mobile development, Objective-C or Android experience, but not necessarily React Native? Okay, so the question is why I think it's good to learn React Native. So it's an easy step to expand your React skills, because most of the rules and paradigms of programming for React Native are the same as for React. So if you already know how to program for web, you can just learn a bit more and do some mobile development. Also, this React Native, it's mobile development, so it's a title of a blog article I found some time ago, but I really like it, and I think it really gives a feeling of how mobile development has been changed since React Native was released. So, because traditionally when you wanted to do a mobile app, so you could do it in Objective-C or Java, but you had to write 2 versions of your app for both platforms. Or you could go with some hybrid platforms like PhoneGap, for instance, where you wrote your app basically as a HTML web page and rendered it in a WebView component. So WebView is a web browser running in your app. So it was faster than native development, but offered subpar user experience. It was easy to notice that the app was written in HTML. And React Native changed it a bit, because you write your app in React, but it is a fully native app. So components are not rendered in WebView, but the native system components are created for your app. So I will talk a bit about it in a moment. And another thing why it's good to learn React Native is that it offers really good mobile development experience. So what I mean about that? So I think that something went a bit wrong with mobile development. So on the left, you've got what is common for web development, and on the right, what used to be for mobile development. So for web, we've got all the open standards like HTML5, CSS, and so on, and mobile platforms are closed. Distribution of web app, so it's just uploading it to some kind of a web server. For mobile app, you need to release it to the App Store or Play Store, wait for approval, but then you end up with your app totally fragmented, because only a fraction of users will install the latest version. The development cycle is also slower for iOS and Android. And also for web development, it's common to have a unified team that can do everything. But for mobile development, you needed to have usually two separate teams. So one that was handling iOS development and another that was handling Android development, if you wanted to address both platforms. So I will show you how React Native solves these problems. And we'll do it in several sessions, like today, because the topic is quite broad. And I called it React Native Academy. So this is also a part of an online course I'm creating. But you will get here everything what will be in this course. So today we'll talk about getting started with React Native. On the next meetup, we'll talk about native components, standard components, and APIs. Then we'll talk about state management. So these are some basic React Native skills. Then we will spend next 3 meetups on things that are, let's say, bread and butter of mobile development. So you've got navigation that is specific to mobile applications. We've got a bit different styling than for the web. And also we've got motion, so these are animations that are also needed for mobile applications, because usually for web applications all the actions are triggered with mouse or keyboard, so user have feedback of what he does, so he feels the key being pressed or the mouse being clicked. So on mobile the animation gives the feedback that something happened. And then I would like to tell you a bit more about some more advanced stuff like testing and continuous integration of React Native apps. Then about updates. So updates can cause a real headache in React Native. So it's good to learn about good practices. And then we'll talk about releasing an app. So let's get started with some basic information. So what you need for mobile development and for iOS, you need a machine with OS 10 system and an iPhone. So unfortunately there's no real workaround for it. You could try to live without OS 10 machine using Expo framework. So Expo is a framework that builds your mobile app in a cloud and you run it directly on your iPhone. But the problem with it is that you are not able to run any native code on it. So you only have what the Expo framework is offering to you. And if you want to do a bit more advanced stuff, you need to eject from it. So I don't recommend it for a more advanced app. You need Xcode, which is IDE made by Apple. It is needed to build the app, to release it, and also it comes with the iOS simulator that you can use to run your app locally. You need some tools to configure your environment. So Homebrew is useful. It's used to install Node on your machine. So Node is used to process JavaScript files of your application. I recommend using Yarn to manage dependencies in your app. Watchman, so it's another tool you need to install. Watchman observes your source code for changes, and if any change occurs, it just reloads your app. And you need React Native command line interface. For Android, you need a bit different stack. So if you want to develop Android app on Windows, so you need obviously Node and React Native command line interface, but you also need Python tool, which is used by build tools offered by React Native, and you also need Java development kit and Android Studio. And the installation itself is pretty well documented. So if you want to get started, just follow the steps in the official docs. At the bottom, you pick your setup, and it's all. It works pretty fine. Okay, so let's start with a sample app, and imagine we've got a pretty standard work assignment. So you're asked to develop a SpaceX mission control app, because Falcon Heavy is launching, so it's launching today, I think, so your deadline is also today. You've got a bunch of designs from marketing department, so let's open it. And while it opens, you also have API where you can get the information about the latest launch. So marketing department prepared something like that, mission patch, some details, and our goal will be to implement this app and use the data offered by this endpoint. So let's just switch folder. Okay, and we create an app with init command, and we add a name of the app after it. So the command line interface does the magic right now. We'll see in a moment what was created. And for React Native development, I'm using Visual Studio Code. So you're pretty much free to use any IDE that you prefer. I mentioned that we need Xcode, but we need it in the background, and we will interact with commands. So we don't need to touch it. Yeah, the app was created, and let's see what we've got here. So some main folders. So you can notice that we've got iOS folder and Android folder. So these are folders that contain the native app. So respectively, here is iOS app, here is the one for Android. So when you create a project, so the real native app is bundled with it. Node modules is another folder that we have, so it just contains node dependencies. So nothing surprising for you should be here. And we've got index.js. So index.js is an entry point for our application. And what it does, so it imports app registry module from React Native, and it registers app component. So the registering a component is something very similar to injecting your component into DOM for web React. So you need to point which component will be handled natively. And now, as our app is ready, we can run it. And we use it with run iOS command, which is launching iPhone simulator, and we'll run our app inside it. So let's wait a moment. So the simulator has started. It takes a bit for the first time to app to be built, but then it goes really fast. And okay, meanwhile, while the app is starting, we can take a look at our design and think how it should be handled. So let's do some thinking in components exercise. So we see that here is a header, some kind of header component with a mission number and a rocket name. Another element is an image with a mission patch. And then we've got another component which contains mission details. It renders in green if the mission was successful. Then we've got two more components that contains information about the launch site and the launch date. Okay, we are almost there, but we can already start implementation. So to make the code well structured, we create an app folder for our JavaScript code base, and inside it components folder. It's still building. Okay. And here we can start implementation of our home component. Okay, it's almost. It's almost done. Yep, so the app is ready and the bundle is transferred to the simulator. Okay, I think it's because it has previous version of the app bundled. So hold on a second. Perhaps I will run iOS. So I will run the app that I prepared previously. So as I don't want to hold you here waiting. Hold on. Okay, one more time. So unfortunately, sometimes when you switch apps, so there is some bundled code cached in simulator, and it causes a problem. So once you get started, everything goes pretty smooth. But as the app is starting, let's talk about the components that we have. So Okay, let's zoom in. Okay, so here we are using the home component to register it. When you go to home, we see that it is a standard React class component. So it extends component from React. It has some lifecycle methods, a render, and the body. So what is the difference between React and React Native? So I think the biggest difference is that React defines the behavior of components, so their lifecycle methods, what they should do, whereas React Native provides mobile implementation of standard components as well as native APIs. So in this example, we have components like view, image, and text. So these are similar components that you know from the web application. So for instance, view is comparable to the div component. So it is a container that can be used, styled, and hold other components. So image displays an image, obviously, and text is used to render text component. So one difference between Web React and React Native is that all the text must be printed using this text component. Okay. Now we have our app. So let's go through this home component and see what it does exactly. We've got a component did mount method, and it's a good place to fetch data from the API. So when application starts and component is mounted, just like for Web React, we fetch data from SpaceX endpoint. We use fetch to retrieve the data, and also React Native comes with async await support out of the box, so we can use it for our convenience. We get the data, get JSON representation of it, and set in state, mission patch location, details, and information about if the mission was successful or not. Render describes how the application looks like. So in React Native, styling is a bit different than in Web React, as we don't have CSS, but there is a, let's say, simplified implementation of CSS flexbox layout. So to pass a style, we use a style property for a component, and then the styles are created as a JavaScript objects. So let's see what it means for our home component. So here our style is a styles container. So this is this part. Flex1 tells React Native to expand the view to the whole screen. And as we can see, this view is expanded, and you can tell by the pale blue background. If we change this background, let's say to blue, we see that it has changed. And Align items and justify content are also elements that are part of Flexbox layout, so they tell us to center the elements. Our view container contains two elements. So first one is an image, and the second one is a text element. So image we can pass the location of an image by the source component, and it is also possible to specify how the image should be transformed if it does not fit the size of our component. So in this case, I wanted to use a contain value, so it means that the image will be minified uniformly so that proportions are maintained. You could use a different value, like for instance cover, so that the images expand to fill the whole area that is available. And another component that is present here is a text, and here is an example of a conditional styling. So instead of defining the fixed color, we use the success value from our state, and if it is true, then the background is greenish. If it is false, the background would be red. And what is very good about React Native is that here we've got an app for iOS, but we can run the very same app for Android. So let's see how it will look like. So for Android, I recommend Genymotion Simulator. So it's free for personal usage. So for learning, and it's free. And here you can create a virtual machine for some devices. So let's run, let's say Google Nexus 5. So it's starting, and while it's starting, let's kill this bundler here so that we avoid potential conflicts.
So the speed of compiling and running is similar to iOS, or would you say one platform is faster?
I would say iOS is a bit more supported by Facebook. And yeah, perhaps it's because iOS development is generally more profitable. So although you've got less devices comparable to Android, I think that the spending in app markets are at least twice as big. So if you are interested in mobile development, so it would be probably more profitable to go with iOS anyway, because you might get more projects in it. And if you want to work on your app, then it would be easier to monetize it on iOS, because I think users are more accustomed to paying for apps than on Android. Okay, so our Nexus 5 has started. Let's first check if it is visible. Yeah, so with ADB devices we different devices available for Android Studio. So if, for instance, we've got an Android phone connected with USB, it would be visible as well here. And now, as this virtual machine is visible, I can run our app. And in terms of performance, Genymotion is faster than standard Android simulator, so it's good to use it. And I also mentioned that you need a real device for development, and one reason for that is that simulators do not support push notifications, and this is a feature that is used very often in mobile apps. So if you want to use it in your app, then you would not be able to test it on simulator. Yeah, so here is the very same code base run on Android. So we can see that the app looks almost the same. There are small differences. So mostly because we've got different fonts available on both platforms, so such changes should be addressed if you want to develop an app for both platforms. But from my experience, the code base is shared in something like 95% between iOS and Android. So it's really convenient way of development.
Maybe like a stupid question, but is there like a way to share code base with web development too? You create like the same web UI.
I mean, yeah, it's a good question in fact, and but the problem is that you've got different components here. So in React Native you've got Vue instead of div and so on. So and we can do two things. So one thing is to use some level of abstraction, and there are already libraries that use div. Let's simplify it, but they use div for web and Vue for native development, but in your app you define the component only once. Yeah, so this is one way to reuse the code between native and web. So I'm not sure if this approach is clear. And another way is just to extract the logic of your app to some external project and use it in your web and native code. So for instance, you could extract your Redux and reducers to another project, another module, and import it externally to web and native development. And like for instance here we've got this logic that fetches data from SpaceX API, and we could externalize it and use in web and native. But I think that reusing the interface would be pretty hard because there are different interaction patterns between web and native developments. For instance, in native navigation works a bit differently. You've got usually the stacks. So when you open a new view, so it's stacked on top of the previous screen.
Maybe there's like a way to install web view if you like work on really hard like visualization component, right, on desktop. Mm-hmm. Just want this nice graph to be also shown in your like React Native.
Yeah, you can always insert a web view here, but then it wouldn't be native component. Yeah, so it would suffer from all the problems that hybrid frameworks offer. But yeah, you could obviously do it.
And you mentioned Redux, so we can use Redux with those apps?
Yeah, of course, because after all, this is standard JavaScript, and this is standard, let's say not standard React, but React with different components. The life cycle is the same, so you can inject states and so on. So in one of the apps that I developed. So I used not Redux but Mobex. It was really helpful and I liked it. So I had no problems with doing it. And I also used TypeScript. So I decided to have some type safety, and although Facebook promotes Flow a bit more, I like TypeScript a bit more, and you can easily do it. And yeah.
Now there's ReasonML.
Yeah, ReasonML, I really like it, but I think it's a bit too early to use it. So ReasonML is an Occam language that you can use for React Native as well. And I think, but please correct me, but you can bypass the JavaScript at all and produce native code from it. And so Occam is a very specific language, so you must like it, but you can be very productive with it once you master it. But the problem is that you need ReasonML bindings for standard components and libraries, and we do not have it here. So I think it will be used more frequently, but not yet. Okay, and also some very nice things that you can do in React Native that improve your development experience. So you can enable live reload, and anytime you change something in your code, your app, at least it works for iOS, but it should reload itself. Okay. Not sure why it's not working for here.
What is the difference between live reload and hot
reload? So live reload restarts your app, and hot reload, perhaps this one will, is updating your components without reloading your app. So this is the same what we have for web React, but as you can see, I just changed the code, and the components are updated, but the whole application state is intact. So when React Native was introduced, so this feature alone was a breakthrough for mobile development, because the change, refresh, reload cycle is much longer if you do iOS or Java. Yeah. Okay, so I think it's pretty much all what I wanted to show you. So our app still differs a bit from the marketing department mockups, but this source code is available in GitHub, so I invite you to download it and play with React Native and try to perhaps display launch site information. So it's really fun to play with it. So do you have any questions?
I have a question about Expo. So you already mentioned that you don't recommend it much.
Yes.
Do you think they will work on those shortcomings? Because when I first saw it, it was like an elevator pitch. I was like, wow, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, but there are so many different native libraries, and I think the intention is that they do not want to add everything. So let's say some basic things like analytics. So I think they included segment out of the box, but if you want to use, let's say, Mixpanel, so you cannot use it directly. You could use segment, I think, to proxy to Mixpanel, but not directly. So it's not, I think it's very intention that, and very possibility, because they can't add everything what is out there. So Expo offers quite a lot of things beside cloud build. For instance, you've got Facebook authentication out of the box, some camera components, and so on. But for instance, when I switch the app to TypeScript, so this is something that wouldn't be possible in Expo because you don't have access to the build configuration. What is really nice about Expo is that you don't care about React Native updates. And because a new version of React Native is released every 2 weeks, and the pace is crazy, really. And there may be some conflicts, and the problem is that conflicts might be in the native stuff. So in iOS projects, for instance. So it happens when you did some native changes, for instance, added some native components on your own and so on. So then you might get some conflicts and it's a bit painful to resolve them. So this is one thing that Expo addresses and does very well. And Expo is good if you want to play with React Native without configuring all the environment. Like you don't need to Xcode, or you need to download Android Studio, which is something like 2 gigabytes, and so I think it's the same for web React. Yeah, there is also this create React app. So do you use it in production, or you eject, or you don't use it at all?
We ejected.
Yeah.
It was because of Wallaby.js. I wanted to use Wallaby.js as a test runner.
Mm-hmm.
And basically you should not touch the configuration.
Yeah.
Managed by React.
Yeah. Yeah. So in React Native you are even more limited. Yeah.